I have to praise you like I should. I have to praise you. I have to praise you. I have to praise you. I have to praise you like I should.
Another big challenge is how to keep Americans safe. Our lead national correspondent, David Begnaud, is in a Brooklyn park that is taking an innovative approach. David, good morning.
Good morning to you. That is the Manhattan skyline behind me. This is Domino Park here in Brooklyn, and there are 30 white circles on the ground, 6 feet apart. The park officials did this knowing that last weekend was a beautiful weekend weather-wise, and so the pictures showed people sitting just as they should have been in their human parking spots, as someone called it. Look, this is just one example of what one community is doing to keep people aware of their proximity to each other. And you can expect to see more of this around the country as the nation continues to reopen.
That's it?
That's New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo completing his COVID-19 test. He's trying to set an example.
That is the whole test. I'm not in pain. I'm not in discomfort. Closing my eyes was a moment of relaxation. There is no reason why you should not get the test.
There is no reason why you should not get the test.
On Monday, Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks partially reopen. Social distancing will be tested at popular attractions like Old Faithful. By Monday, 48 states will have relaxed stay-at-home orders. Over the weekend, at least 5 saw an uptick in coronavirus. But in Texas, it was a surge, the state reporting more than 1,800 new cases Saturday, the biggest single-day jump since the pandemic began. More than 700 cases were reported at a meatpacking facility in Amarillo. Behavior is the wild card, like the scuffle in San Antonio. Store employees confronted a customer who refused to wear a mask. Governors are carefully watching infection rates, the crowds, and more testing. New York's Andrew Cuomo showed how it's done at a press conference today.
Now testing is really going to be very helpful in monitoring the virus.
We're going to have to be mindful that we have to really touch base with folks several times during the course of the day, because life is completely different than it was in March, and we all have to get used to that.
Here's what that looks like. If you work for Ford, you have to do a health certification from home. If you have even minor symptoms, something like the sniffles, they will probably ask you to stay home. If you go to work, they immediately check you when you walk in, things like temperature checks, and then you've got to wear goggles and a face shield at work.
Open.
They wiped off all of the tables. They had menus that were disposable, so people weren't reusing them. I feel like they're doing a really good job, which makes us feel a lot more safe.
States reopening despite upward case trends. The other word they love to use is uptick. We must be sure to avoid an uptick in CV infections. More trends, rates, spikes, cases, and falsely attributed death tolls compiled and compounded to stir the pot of dissonance and, of course, fear. Yes, to indeed stretch out further the helping hand of confusion. Better yet, we could say the moment of the author of confusion is at hand. As this pervasive and all-encompassing confusion mutates and changes its form day by day on screen, we grow even more tired, sick and tired. But of course, the relentless confusion campaign continues on screen, in our homes, in our minds, to extend our already exhaustive stay in woo-woo land. Whether it's the Wuhan wiggle or the cannoli chuckle, the 21st century civilian has found themselves in quite the pickle. You can't go outside until cases decrease, and the moment you step outside, they report that cases have increased. Welcome to our postmodern circus where science is absurdity and clowns are in authority.
To ensure safety. The bottom line, say infectious disease experts, people must follow the guidelines.
The minute that people start violating them, we are likely to see problems.
It's like we are in some dystopian carnival. At one moment, stuck in the Hall of Mirrors, then the next, trapped in a live play session of whack-a-mole. And you are the furry creature. Because if you think about it, this whole reopening society deal is a mass-scale game of whack-a-mole. But I'm not sure if society is dizzy from the spell of broadcasting or from the continuous whacks to the skull. Either way, we definitely ain't in Kansas anymore. We're now in a new place, taking on a new face, or lack thereof. A new beginning is on the horizon. The 21st century and its new formal has officially begun, and the new world is unfolding its arms. Obviously, if the reopening of society is allowed under the conditions of enforced distancing and face covering, yet cases are still rising, and the reopening is still allowed, one could conclude that the entire lockdown quarantine effort was in fact a sham and pointless. Why? Well, we could have just as easily taken the reopening measures we are taking now in the initial state of this scamdemic. Sweden would be a perfect example of this. If an operating open society with limited contact and enforced protective measures works now, why would it not have worked then? Especially considering that locking possibly infected or asymptomatic persons inside for an extended duration to then let them out would logically lengthen infection episodes and foment an even more massive outbreak. Yet it hasn't. Possibly there was no threat to begin with, or the initial quarantine and panic-demic measures were thoroughly asinine. Or possibly this has all been arranged in a way that was designed to make us truth speakers jump the gun and call out all this madness that has been purposely orchestrated to bait us in, to then witness them pull a genuine attack and a real release of real death, real disease, and terror. Just to have the opportunity to put all the blame on those who spoke out against the establishing regime, fulfilling the ultimate goal of a socio-global paradigm shift, and the final silencing and muzzling of anyone that would so dare speak against the powers that be ever again. It's a reasonable idea. I mean, anything is possible at this point.
You can get into trouble quickly with this virus, and it takes you a longer time to turn that curve and to turn that infection rate. So, don't let a spike happen in the first place. Learn that lesson. Got it.
Considering all of this, I still currently am under the impression that the entire shelter-in-place order was an operation for behavior modification, similar to the tactics of siege utilized in warfare against opposition territory. It is a tried and true method that subdues any group, seizes the subjects mentally and physically, breaking the spirit and robbing their sense of humanity. The experience of extended trauma and helplessness subdues the will and extorts obedience. Also, the experience creates a type of trauma bond between the subject group, thereby breaking identity boundaries and creating an enmeshment response, a codependency, and overall a deconstruction of the individual and destruction of a sovereign identity. In result, this method of control and domination produces a docile, codependent, and eager to comply population of otherwise autonomous and free-thinking individuals. Look at what has happened to America and Americans in less than a few months. It is no mystery that this method of abuse is used for extreme punishment for criminals in, say, prisons, from cell block collectives or harsher methods, also known as solitary confinement. Let us examine the language they purposely use to subconsciously inject this idea. Lockdown, similar to timeout, detention, or better, the treatment of a hostage. Lockdown? Is this not direct penitentiary vocabulary? Is it just a matter of time until we hear the phrase lights out? Why such austere and harrowing terminology? This brings us back to the psychological phenomenon of word association and its importance to propaganda journalism. Lockdown associates the padlock and the key, magnifying the contingency between confinement and liberty, the middle passage between slavery and freedom. The only worthy questions that remain: who holds the key, and who is being locked away? Do you get the type of picture such word usage plants as a germinating seed in the minds of a subjugated population? Do you pick up on the sentiment and subtext within the strategic term lockdown? Let's continue. And for the normie that might exclaim the importance of the lockdown and how it worked, or how it was the only option we had to stop the spread, well, first I would say get off the MSM pipe. Your ribs are showing, and your teeth are falling out. Second, I would question their familiarity with herd immunity, or history for that matter. I've come to the conclusion that these deer-in-the-headlights-eyed civilians that get their news from an app and engage with the world solely through Facebook are unfit for rational dialogue. They are just too far gone, up to the ears in Soylent Green and void of any original thought in their mind. Yet this is exactly where the establishment wants us all.
I wear my face mask in my car so I can virtue signal in my neighborhood. And I wear my face mask when I walk so I can make sure they all know I'm really smart.
Keep your distance.
While they're deceiving me, it cuts my immunity. TV's got control of me. I turn it on, they say.
But this is not over yet.
Don't trust the man with the orange skin, oh no.
It comes from China. But there has to be some form of punishment.
Don't mess around with the CDC numbers. Oh no, I can't believe it. We gotta make him a billionaire, oh yeah.
And then the final solution, which is a year to 2 years off, is the vaccine.
I wear my face mask in my house so I can stop a symptomatic disease spread to myself. And I wear my face mask when I bike so I can placate all the Karens at the park. And now the who is deceiving me. Trade freedom for security. TV's got control of me. I turn
Tonight, this blunt warning.
This virus will just come back.
From one of the doctors charged with leading the global response to the coronavirus.
It will come back very loudly, roaring, and it will cause further distress.
David Nabarro of the World Health Organization says without a unified global plan, the pandemic will only get worse.
A unified global plan?
This is exactly where the establishment wants us all. In cognitive limbo, stuck in platitude purgatory, wrestling with the sweet nothings of Lester Holt and dreamy terrapin Anne Marie. What's worse is they even continue the abuse through their media, rubbing the devastating and debilitating results of our condition in our faces with studies that blatantly describe the terrifying effects of solitude and sequestered living situations. It's like they are basically saying, sorry, we have to lock you in your homes and it's very likely going to kill you slowly in some form or fashion. But hey, check out these new summer tops. Pink hair dye is trending. Don't miss out on the latest TikTok bake-off challenge while you're at it. This is why I maintain that normative narcissism, coupled with conspicuous consumption of our liberated and progressive bourgeois, has rendered mass man existentially illiterate. Not only does he not understand his self, or his surroundings and the meanings within, but he no longer has the capacity to use proper reason. He is now the resulting product of what culture makes of him, and she is no different.
What was that? We're sheep? Thank you for coughing. Bye.
Hey! Baby's over here. Move. Wow.
She's coughing on him.
Wow.
She's spitting on him. Now calling the police.
Oh, she's spitting. I got it.
All we need is your hand. That's all we need. Happy Hill. Happy Hill. You will get your money back. When? Whenever the bank is done. You ain't coming in though. I know that much. No, we gotta go. Whenever you get your motherfucking Here. You refuse these services because you're just stupid. You are so stupid.
It's a mess. This entire thing is just an utter mess. While the civilians in high number whine and wail for their eager return to the pre-pandemic times, more and more, even the use of such terminology, they're beginning to realize we will never be going back to former times of granted comfort. And their language and word usage like pre-pandemic times, post-COVID society, and the ubiquitous term, new normal, seem to crowd every corner of text media. Newspeak, as it were, perfect examples of conditioning the degenerated mind of the mass man. The lapping dolt knows no better. He has no God. He has no self. He has no meaning. What better vessel to be filled with aphorisms and utter establishment media state-funded nonsense? An open mind is just that, something to be filled and topped off. Too many today seem to open their minds just to be filled, instead of sculpting their minds to be used. So without legitimate science and with illegitimate data, they have convinced you the lockdown worked. And all of a sudden you are allowed to return to your gatherings at limited capacity, but with new rules and regulations and constraints on your being. Could this have been the solution to the problem in reaction from the outset? Yet another Hegelian dialectic for the umpteenth time? Why, yes. Well, think about it. Without the scientific and arbitrary implementation of shelter-in-place mandates, the population would be much less willing to accept the audacious and irrational demands and plans of the technocratic state. And now that they have convinced you it actually worked, they can hold this false sense of success as leverage and utilize your credulity to abuse you further and to handle you ever more.
saves lives. We don't know if it actually beats out the virus. Does it actually combat it? We don't know that. There's still a lot unknown. A vaccine, all the optimism on Moderna's vaccine, probably just cautious optimism at most at this point. Still very early. They only had 8 patients enrolled in that phase 1 study. So there's a lot unknown, which means we have to hold the line on masks. You know, the fact of the matter here is that universal masking protects those who can't escape to the Hamptons or who can't go and do telework. It's going to really impact our frontline workers, our grocery store clerks, our nurses, our respiratory therapists, those who are, by the way, predominantly women, who are predominantly people of color. That's who it's going to protect. So I don't understand why masks has now become this cultural war, this trigger word for so many people. These are basic things that we all need to hold the line on and build consensus on. And if our president's not going to message on it, we need to.
A unified global plan.
Like the abusive parent terrorizes its child, through the continuous and interchanging use of shame, guilt, and punishment. Shame, you aren't wearing your mask. Guilt, it's your fault, you killed grandma, people are dying. And of course, punishment. You people aren't following the rules. Now, because of your lack of compliance, we will have to fabricate these here case numbers and lock you back down in your homes until we have subdued that last thread of dignity you have left. This is like antebellum buck breaking superimposed on an entire country, yet including women along with the men. This cycle of abuse has laser-like efficiency and literally taps into the most primordial and primal depths of mankind. So you better believe this shame, guilt, and punishment cycle will ensue indefinitely. And of course, one might ask, why would the government do such a thing? Well, that would take far more than this video has in duration to unpack, but first let's just ask, why has specifically America been hit so hard with mandates and extended lockdown orders? The rest of the world seems to be opening rather quickly and suffering very little from a rash of new and threatening outbreaks. Aside from Brazil, of course, which appears to be simply a dramatized round 3 of the prior Italy round 2 theatrics, and of course the Wuhan round 1 apocalyptic inception. Anyhow, why is it that mainly America is opening so slowly and suffering such spikes and surges in new case numbers? Why does it appear that America especially is beneath the microscope? To answer this question seems to be rather simple, though this is merely a theory of my own, and I do not mean to maintain that my perspective is concrete fact. But one thing we can look at is the notion that America is the social, cultural, and political engine of the earth. It reigns as the head petri dish in the global experiment. What succeeds in America proceeds worldwide. Good examples would be Coca-Cola Classic, Pepsi, abortion clinical assistance, adult internet content. McDonald's, and pop music culture. American cultural mores and customs transcend all human culture. In other words, what is meant to be global cannot be unless Americans have adopted it. For instance, the collectivist and communitarian behavior model that is required for a technocratic global order to succeed, like say what you will find in China or Fabian socialist Europe, does not exist in the United States. America is home of the broad-chested and steel-spined individualist, the maverick, mover and shaker, that prepares his own path and manifests his own destiny. The entire historical legacy of the American people is rooted in this opposing and, I would claim, threatening individualistic behavior model. But threatening to whom? Possibly to an organized movement that, in order to succeed, relies on its blotting out.
People have been exchanging goods and ideas on a global scale for millennia. But in the past few decades, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the opening up of capital markets, the rise of information technology, and the reduction in trade tariffs, the pace of global connectivity has greatly increased, as many countries and people have entered into a single global economy of exchange. Although the initial phases of economic globalization may be behind us today, soaring flows of cross-border data channeled through the internet are taking globalization to new levels. Today, 1 billion people are coming online every 5 years as digital platforms are coordinating ever more spheres of economy and society. The level of globalization fostered by the information revolution is altogether unprecedented in human history, as the speed with which information, transactions, and capital can travel virtually anywhere on the planet enables the sustained coordination of human activity at a new scale and level of complexity. At the heart of this evolution in human organization is the question of how can we manage the global economy? How can we manage these global networks in an effective fashion? Today, the case can be easily made that we have not and are not capable of doing this. From financial crisis and offshore tax havens to an incapacity to deal with migration and refugees. Further, environmental challenges such as global warming, cross-boundary water and air pollution, and overfishing of the ocean are directly linked with lack of global governance. To date, neither markets nor public institutions have proven effective at delivering sustainable solutions to the management of the global economy on its different levels. The industrial age macro-scale management structure of the nation-state has not transformed to meet the demands of an emerging set of global networks that require a new form of management structure that is today significantly lacking, and this has many systemic detrimental effects. Global institutions built on the framework of the nation-state, like the World Bank, WTO, IMF, and United Nations, although effective in some ways, are ultimately an incomplete solution to global governance, as they are piecemeal, undemocratic, often ineffective, and have not created the desired results. Today, few people desire the formation of a centralized global government that might be able to manage the global commons in the same way that the nation-state did for national economies. While private actors and markets have evolved into a global structure, such a system of organization without regulation has proved to create huge social and environmental negative externalities that are unsustainable in many ways. The form of globalization that we have developed has turned out to be very unsustainable. While this global interconnectivity is working to disintegrate the social welfare state, in many ways it has not yet replaced it with a viable model on the global level.
The American beating heart of individualism, tradition, and common man Christian culture is an impediment to technocratic progress. Because within a technocracy, the sovereign citizen can no longer exist, and it is exchanged for the role of the subjugated civilian. Here we discover the progress of the American people has never been the state motive, but the progress of technocracy at the expense of American freedom. Most other countries, especially those in the East, already display the cultural preconditions for technocratic totalitarianism. A good example of this is to take a historical look at where communism and totalitarianism in general has succeeded geographically. These locations will not be found in the American Northwest, but overwhelmingly in the East, or regions that have been subsumed by Eastern collectivism. These collectivist nations are preened and pruned in a way that commandeers their development, growth, and function. They are preformed, docile, and compliant, as any collectivist population would be. Though they differ in tradition and custom, flair and face, they all share a tone of obedience and allegiance to authority. A hive mind describes these populations. The same cannot be said for America, though as I hope to have demonstrated, we see this idea slowly changing. Since given a lemon for a society, baby boom and Gen X populations have eroded socioeconomic vitality, thereby passing down a rotten lemon. In response, and thanks to the millennials and followed up by the Gen Z digital natives, codependency defines the generations, and the collectivistic communitarian worldview is now overshadowing the classical American individualism of the 20th century. More and more, we are taking on the preconceived cultural behavior model of other docile, needy, and obedient nations. Yet individualism still exists in the bones of the American people. The culture wars of recent years are plenty evidence. The transformation of an entire generation in society can take at minimum an entire decade of intensified and consistent social engineering. Thanks to social media, smart technology immediacy, and majority usage, this time frame can be drastically reduced, which hastens the process of societal change. And the closer we get to 2030, the more annoying and aggravating the sting of citizen sovereignty becomes, blurring the vision of the full spectrum global domination. Possibly they need to quicken their operation with warp speed to secure their success. Possibly methods of panic, confusion, insecurity, and promises of safety will justify and warrant this said need for speed, and ultimately justifying rapidly a new order of things. We must shut up and comply by relying on our alleged leaders to form our destiny and protect our best interests. Now, if American individualism stands as the thorn in the eye of a unified global plan, how could one go about disrupting, destabilizing, or better, shattering this sense of national individualism? Let us not get the narcissistic individualism of postmodern present confused with the traditional individualism of the Reformed Christian worldview. The individual in Christ, made in God's image, of love, of power, and a sound mind, sovereign, dignified, and autonomous. Not to be confused with the 21st century pseudo-individualist detected by a sense of normative narcissism, the solipsist preoccupied with self, made in culture's image of lust, codependence, and a double mind. One stands as the product, participant, and beneficiary of the technocracy, while the other stands as the only left hindering object and obstruction prolonging the transition to a new guard. The end of a tradition and staple of the West is the true crisis here, freezing society between the past and the future, lest they remember where they have come from, regaining the vision to see where they are going, or being taken. And possibly, the historical culture of liberty Americana poses a density, a depth of field that requires more time with much greater sized tools to penetrate and remove. As they work their magic with numbers and spellbinding words, imagery, and boundaries, the wand now hovers above America with a dedicated intensity. Now ask yourself, how fast can a wizard turn an eagle into a mule?